go.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the week that was. You got Todd here, Jeremy over there. Today is Friday, January 21st, and this week has been pretty crazy. How you doing, Jer?
Doing pretty well. I mean, I think I'm used to all of the craziness by now, and it doesn't really affect me much.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta just let the bullshit not affect you, so that's good. So I guess we'll just hop right in. Did you hear that our completely sentient and non-senile president held a press conference the other day?
I heard about it. I had a super busy week, so I actually haven't heard or followed too much news this week, which maybe that's why I'm having such a good week. But fill me in, because I heard we're on the brink of a war.
Well, I don't think we're on the brink of a war. I think Ukraine's about to get its shit fucked up. But yeah, so Joe Biden held a press conference, and it went on for a really long time. I think I was seeing tweets that said it was actually possibly the longest press conference in like recent history of all presidents. I think it went for like 2 hours, which is obviously a terrible idea for Joe Biden. Like, that is an awful, terrible idea.
I'm surprised he remembered everything for the 2 hours, where he obviously didn't.
Well, he apparently contradicted himself a couple times. At one point, I think he said in a press conference that 95% of schools were open. And then at another point about, later in the press conference, he said 98% of schools were open. So I guess, in the process of the press conference, 3% of schools more opened up. So that's great to hear.
Hey, it's possible. It's possible.
So, but I think the wildest thing, he said two things that I wanted to really focus on that were just like absolutely just like, what the hell was going on? So the first thing he said, obviously we've had this voting rights bill act going around, which is a very controversial bill. I think there are some good parts of it. I think there are some bad parts of it. I think with the way it's constructed right now, it definitely should not pass. And at the end of the day, I think that right now, it doesn't matter, because this is an issue that the media and politicians on the left are screaming that this is the most important thing ever. But when they've polled people consistently on this, no one cares about this issue. They care about inflation. They care about pandemic restrictions and the pandemic, being fixed and testing, and they care about the economy, and they care about global warming. This is not a top issue for people, and yet they keep pushing for it. And so Joe Biden was asked a question of saying, given that we don't have this voting rights bill going forward, and given some of the laws that states like Texas and Georgia has passed, do you think the results of the 2022 elections will be legitimate? And he basically said, he channeled his inner Trump and was basically like, well, I think there will be legitimate questions about whether or not the results of the election in 2022 are legitimate. And it's just like, what the hell, man? Like, that's like at a time when we have more people on both sides, frankly, because everyone forgets that Democrats,
the Russian interference.
Yeah. And also that in 2016, 2000, and in 2004, the Democrats were the ones breaking out their tinfoil hats and making conspiracy theories about the Supreme Court being in the pocket of George Bush, or, Diebold voting machines being, hacked or being controlled by George Bush donors. And then in 2016, obviously, the Russian collusion and thing, which has been shown to be complete nonsense. So, for the leader of the Democrat Party, for the president of this country to stand up at a press conference and make a statement like that is just incredibly irresponsible and super divisive and not helpful. So what are your thoughts on him throwing some wood on that fire?
I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all. I wish I gotta watch this speech after. I'm not gonna watch 2 hours of it, obviously, but I only really saw headlines of it. I gotta look more into it. I don't know. I guess I'm curious what's going to happen with Ukraine, because that seems like the biggest. That seems like the biggest mess up that he did. And
that was the other thing I wanted to bring up, was that when asked about Ukraine, he basically implied that if Russia did a small incursion into Ukraine, like, it might not be that big of a deal. And I was actually I was just texting with my dad and brother about this on our group text, and I said, that is an insane statement. And like, if Mexico took over 1 square mile of barren desert in Texas, we would bomb the fuck out of them.
Yeah.
And the thing
we think about bombing them just from them immigrating.
Like, or because of the cartels. Like,
yeah.
And so this idea of being like talking about a sovereign nation and being like, yeah, if there's a little bit of take like a little bit of your country, is it really that big of a deal? Like, that's nuts. And the thing that's great about it is that, the Ukrainian president, I think he just tweeted simply, there is no such thing as a small incursion, which when you're talking about national sovereignty and borders and military is absolutely true. There is no such thing as a small incursion. Like if China just decided to set up a military base, on the borderlands, but in Texas, people would be freaking out and we would be pushing them out with force.
Well, it's interesting to me too that like especially Biden, there's rumors that he had like deals with China, or at least Hunter Biden was getting paid from China or whatever. Is like, why don't you say these types of things about China? Why do you say them about like Russia? I don't know. Just seems like interesting because China usually is doing very similar things to Russia. I don't know. Just like interesting that they don't comment on what they do sometimes.
Yeah, no, I think it's crazy. And then the other thing, the thing that's funny about this, and I don't know if you recall this, but one of Joe Biden's things, and every time he's run for president, is he pitches himself as being like a foreign policy expert, and that he knows world leaders and he's an expert and he knows this and he knows that. And it's basically this like media created lie about Joe Biden, because if you actually look back at many of his statements and many of his policy proposals, they've just shown to be basically completely just like wacky or completely off the wall and not correct at all. And, to have the president make a statement in a press conference, and then the president of Ukraine directly basically calls bullshit. And then also I saw that Macron, the prime minister of France, or president, I'm not sure how they do it over there, but he's basically trying to lead an effort now to create a defensive strategy amongst, all the EU nations to counter Russia and to counter, and to respond when something happens in Ukraine. Because at this point, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Like, we all know this, and so the fact that foreign policy expert Joe Biden puts his foot in his mouth so bad that he's publicly repudiated on Twitter by the president of the country that we're talking about, and then the leader of one of the primary countries in the EU is now making plans of saying like, we need to get together because we can't rely on America. Like, that's really bad. Like, and it's, I think it's funny because everyone always talks about like when Trump was president, when I would travel internationally, they'd be like, oh, your president's an asshole and this, that, and the other. And people in America would be like, oh, I hate traveling when George Bush was president or when Trump was president, because everyone always is like so upset at us for our president. And I'm like, I don't give a shit what these people think about us, because you know what? They still depend on us. We still sort of run the global hegemonic power structure of the West. And like, I don't care if a bunch of effete liberal Europeans are like upset at what is going on. Like, yeah, I could agree with the beef about the Iraq war, but like, I really, at the end of the day, don't care what a bunch of people in Spain or France think about the US or US foreign policy. Don't really care that much.
Well, the thing is too, I feel like we cared too much the last like 4 years, and that's, I mean, not saying it was bad to get rid of Trump, but that's kind of why we have Biden. I feel is because we just didn't like being seen as like the joke of the world or whatever. But I don't know. To me, it seems like we're just as big a joke as before. So I don't really know the improvement. And I guess what I'm interested to see, or I always like am curious of, all the people who are super left liberals and gung-ho about getting Trump out and Biden in, most of them I feel like are saying now like, oh, we didn't want Biden, he was just the better of the two horrible choices. And it's like, one, is he actually better? Like, are we in a better situation now than we would be if we had Trump? I'm not so sure of that. But then also, why did you guys try and promote someone who you knew wouldn't be good? Why didn't we try and promote someone who would actually have progress? Just seems like a little bit backwards to me that like the left-hand side doesn't even really support the person that they promoted. They kind of like stick away from it and go like, oh no, we actually didn't really want him. And I don't know, that's just weird to me.
Well, and I think it's interesting because I think that, you know, it's basically common knowledge at this point, or it's an accepted that the Democrats are going to be completely just like shit upon in the 2022 elections. Yeah. And I'm sure that's probably going to be the case. I think the Republicans will definitely take back the House. Because of the way the Senate seats that are up for election this year, it's not likely they're going to retake the Senate just because it's mostly Republican-held seats that are up in this cycle. But you know, I think that the one thing that might actually snap the Democrats and the media into reality and make them start being a little more sane is when they see just how badly they get beaten down at the ballot box. Because, you know, the one thing they care more about, let's be clear, they don't care about solving COVID. They don't care about protecting Ukraine. They don't care about if your bills are going up. They care about their power. That's it. And so if they're seeing that, oh shit, what we're doing is resulting in Republicans having like massive majorities in the House, possibly retaking the Senate, possibly getting the Senate filibuster-proof majority within the next 4 years, they're going to modify, because they don't care if you complain about things. They don't care if your life is hard. They care if their life is hard and if their power is being diminished. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the elections in this year and how the Democrats respond to it.
Yep, I agree. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I can't believe we're already talking about elections. Like, I feel like we just got out of them. And 2022 elections are coming up. And then right after that, we're already starting the next presidential cycle. So I don't know, the next 2, 3, 4 years, I feel like are already kind of gonna be just wild.
Without going down too much of a rabbit hole, I saw Andrew Yang tweeted that Democrat sources are telling him that Joe Biden won't be running in 2024, and so they are holding back money until they, you know, let people know, you know, until there's like a better candidate. So what is your gut instinct, without going down a rabbit hole on this? Does Joe Biden run in 2024? Yes, no?
I don't know if it matters if he runs or not. He's not winning. That's for sure. And
do you think Trump could beat him? If Trump runs, do you think Trump wins?
I think as of now, if that's who it's between, I think Trump is coming back. I really do. I think it's either like Trump or fucking the Florida guy, Ron DeSantis, or like one of those knuckleheads.
God, I hope it's DeSantis. I think, you know, I don't love everything he's done. And I think some of his look, I don't support COVID mandates, but I don't like when a state passes a law that says businesses can't have a vaccine mandate. That's just as anti-freedom as a state passing a rule that says you must have a vaccine mandate. And this idea of like, well, he's protecting the right. No, you're not. You're restricting businesses, and you're being sort of a little tyrant in a way that a lot of people on the right cheer for, but it's still it's not a principled stance.
It's basically an AOC on the other side. It's people just getting more and more outrageous because it makes their base happy, and then they just dig in farther and farther.
Absolutely. What do you got this week?
So I'm gonna do something short and sweet because I actually have to go to the bathroom a little bit. That's kind of why I've been moving a little. But and what's it called? I don't know if I even have too much to say about it. It bothers me, but more I talk about it, more people who just don't listen and go like, oh, you're just making up a fuss about nothing. So this week, I'll preface it with a couple facts. There's over 1 billion Asians in the world, over 1 billion Asians in the world. They have a lot of power. They have multiple countries that Asians are the main person in that country. There's 18 million Jews. That's 18 million compared to 1 billion Asians, right? There was a hostage situation
Oh, Jesus Christ.
at a synagogue this week where 4 Jews were taken hostage in a synagogue. There was also an Asian American woman, Michelle Guo, who was pushed into a subway in New York and killed.
Crazy person.
There's more talk about anti-Asian hate and stop Asian hate than there is about anti-Semitism. And I just don't understand it at all. I understand like a life is very valuable and fragile, and someone dying is definitely a big deal, where 4 people didn't die. But I didn't really hear too much at all about the synagogue situation. And when I mentioned it on Facebook, I made like a little post. A few people actually said like, why should we give that any attention? Jews are just like complainers and this and that. And it's
who actually said that to you?
Someone said that to me. Yeah, just confirms that that person obviously is a Jew hater. But it's just crazy to me that like people say Jews control the media. Well, if I'm Jewish, if I was in control of the media, I would make sure everyone was talking about the synagogue and the hostage situation. But that didn't happen. So I don't understand what people's reasoning is, why Jews control the media, Jews control the world, but we don't make rules that benefit us, and we don't promote news stories that benefit us. Why is that? I saw a lot more about Michelle Guo this week and Stop Asian American Hate, Stop Asian Hate, than I did about anti-Semitism when a synagogue was taken hostage. Like, that's a terrifying situation in a place of worship to be taken hostage, but people just don't seem to care about that. And it's wild to me, but it's actually like as surprising as it should be. It's not so surprising because people are blatant in their anti-Semitism. They don't even hide it anymore. It's kind of acceptable to hate Jews and to just not accept them.
Yeah, well, and I want to bring up a couple things on this. So this story had a lot of coverage initially, and I was on some Reddit threads
the first day, for one day.
And the reason is because everyone assumed that the guy holding hostages was some white yokel with a fucking gun, because it's Texas. It's obviously some racist, right-wing Christian white power guy.
Exactly.
Who else would it possibly be? Oh shit, it's actually a British dude who's a Pakistani immigrant who's holding them hostage to try to free an ISIS and Al-Qaeda oriented terrorist.
Yeah,
that's inconvenient. Can't talk about that anymore. Like, and the other thing, and I don't know if you saw this, but the FBI caught a lot of shit because they released a statement that said at first that basically they're like, this attack has nothing to do, like the motivations of the attacker are not related to the Jewish community at all. And then everyone's like, well, no, the guy has openly made statements about killing Jews and being anti-Israel. And apparently during the hostage situation was like ranting and raving about this. The thing that I think that not enough people are talking about is the politicization of the FBI and our like federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies is super, super, super dangerous. It is really, really, really bad, and is going to have really bad consequences, and is just like, holy shit. Like that whole story was absolutely insane. And you're absolutely right. Like, you know, there's a funny thing they do these studies where they ask people like, how many Jews do you think are in the world? Or like what percentage of the population? And people will answer like 10%, 20%. And like,
people have no idea.
No, and the crazy thing in this statistic, and I'm sure we might have even talked about it, but there are less Jews today than there were before the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. That is insane.
And like, the thing is, to me, like what really like means a lot to me, or why I'm like so passionate about it. Like, I care about religion. I don't care so much about it though. I want people to be able to practice whatever they want, but it's not like I think this religion's good and this one's not, or anything like that. But Jews are so close to being wiped off the planet, and then there's no more of them that ever exist. And I don't think people realize how close we are to that and how likely or possible that is to happen. And it's like any life lost is horrible and should be mourned and like tried to prevent. But if there's 1 million Chinese people who die, doesn't really affect the Asian population out much. If there's 10 million, it's true though. If there's 20 million Asians who die or Chinese people who die, guess what? The population doesn't really change much. If there's 20 million Jews who die, that's more than there are Jews. You'd actually have to borrow some Jews from heaven to kill them again. And like, there's literally not 20 million of them. So like, to me, that's just so obvious that it's important to like protect them, and that they're very vulnerable. There's not a lot of them, and like they need to be protected, or there's a good chance that they're not going to be around anymore. But no matter how much you say it, people don't understand it. People hear 18 million and they go, oh, that's plenty. But like 18 million is literally what fits in New York. Like it's not a lot. Most
It's
of
absolutely insane. And you know, I think you're in such an interesting position because, like, you know, you're sort of more left leaning, I'm sort of more right leaning. We both 100% agree on sort of Israel foreign policy matters and things like that. But like it is so nuts how accepted anti-Semitism, especially on the left, is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like
Trump was right. Yo, I really have to go to the bathroom. This is my last comment. I gotta get this in though. Trump said something in the end of December, and fucking CNN called him anti-Semitic about it. Trump was right. He was 100% right.
he said.
I don't know how CNN could call someone anti-Semitic when CNN's not Jewish, and he was talking, basically saying that people don't support Jews enough. He was more or less saying how the far left Jews in America don't support Israel and don't support Jews. And he said that we supported Jews and Israel a lot more back in the day, and we've kind of lost that. And he said it, I'm sure, in a way that wasn't the most politically correct, whatever, but everything he said was completely right. And you go to my synagogue, everyone agrees with him. You go to any synagogue that actually practices Judaism, not like the church synagogues where it's like American Judaism, whatever. But you go to an actual synagogue that celebrates Rosh Hashanah, that celebrates Shabbat, anything like that, they all were like, no, Trump was right, 100%. And it's just interesting how CNN can create the narrative of what Jews think about Trump when CNN doesn't like Jews, doesn't support Jews, doesn't care for them.
Well, and that is just what is absolutely nuts to me. Like, especially like you see these at these, you know, pro-Palestinian protests, you'll often see signs held by Jewish people with like the Payos and the whole thing, and they're holding like, you know, Jews for Palestine. And it's just like, yo, bro, how about you go take that sign and go walk around a settlement or a refugee camp in Gaza for, I don't know. I mean, how long do you think it would take before that guy got cracked upside the head and killed? 20 minutes?
Yeah, exactly.
10? Like, it's the same thing when you see these like LGBTQ people for Palestine. It's like, and they all look sort of wacky and have their crazy hair, and they like are very outwardly presenting as queer and gay. And it's like, you would be strung up so fast if you were walking around in Saudi Arabia or Iran or the Gaza Strip. Like, yeah, I just don't get it.
I just saw that this last week. Someone was bashing Israel, like supporting Palestine or something, and they had pronouns. And I was like, you know, there's no pronouns in Palestine, right?
They don't do that.
The only place in the Middle East that will actually look at your pronouns and respect you is Israel. The only place where you have rights, where you could probably vote, where you could do this or that, is Israel. You can't drive in half those countries. You can't do anything in half those countries, but people go, free Palestine, Israel's apartheid state. And it's like, okay, keep on just repeating what you're hearing and not really thinking about it.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely crazy. I do feel like I'm literally going insane when I watch discourse on Jews in America and Israel, because like it just feels like it is completely fact free. Like it feels like just that people are just creating a reality that is just not anywhere close to true, and they're just like, this is the way things are, and it's like, well, or not. So yeah, but yeah, really great point bringing up the that hostage situation, because the coverage of that on the media was terrible. The response by the FBI was terrible. Oh, the other thing, the FBI originally said that the hostages were freed, which is not what happened. The rabbi there, basically because of training they had, because it's very common for synagogues and Jewish people to have like active shooter trainings, because this is so common that they do trainings on it. And using the training he had, he made sure that they were sitting in a place that was lined up with an exit door. And the hostage taker told them to get on their knees. He looked him in the eye and was like, no. And then he saw an opportunity and he was just like, run. And then they escaped. They escaped. They weren't freed. This asshole from Pakistan didn't have a change of heart and decide to let them go. Yeah. And like, honestly,
that's the narrative everyone remembers, and no one's going to look into it. They don't care.
And the thing, you know, honestly, like, I'm of two minds. Like, I'm happy that this guy took a bullet to the face and his brain exploded. Like, that's great. But honestly, it would have been better if we caught him live and had tried him, because we would have gotten to hear all his anti-Semitic nonsense. Yeah. It would have been, and of course, the media wouldn't have covered it, but some media would have, the honest media would have. And we would have been able to see, like, this is what these people think. Like, this is what anti-Semitism looks like. Like, this is not just, it's not just a right-wing white dude problem. Like, it's, you know, it's crazy.
It's a big problem, but I got to run to the bathroom. I'm going to drop a different type of bomb, and I'll talk to you.